Welcome everyone to today's Fireside chat focusing on the topic of Budget the Benefit. My name is Michelle Hewitt. I'm the Chair of Disability Without Poverty, and I'll be one of our hosts for today's event. Before we begin with the webinar, I'm going to go over our accessibility components and the agenda for today. Please note that throughout the event, we will have the chat closed to the public as it can be disruptive to other participants. If you are experiencing technical difficulties, you will be able to send a chat message to the hosts and panelists. For all questions that you have, please put those in the Q&A box, usually at the bottom of your screen. We'd greatly encourage you to share your questions, as we'll be responding to as many as we can live during our conversation today. Our meeting today features simultaneous English and French translation, LSQ and ASL interpretation, English and French captioning. Please take a moment to adjust your settings as appropriate. First, please select your preferred language, English or French. You do this by selecting the interpretation option on your Zoom menu. Once you select this option, you will not need to change language settings again during the presentation. You must select a language even if you want to hear this presentation in English. If you're using a mobile device, such as a phone or a tablet, you can find the language interpretation options under More. For those who require ASL or LSQ interpretation, we will be spotlighting those components throughout the presentation. No need to do anything. These will automatically remain on your screen. To enable captions, select the Captions option on your Zoom menu. If you would like to adjust the size and placement of these captions, you will need to go into your Zoom accessibility settings. For those of you who would like to access French captions for the event today, please click on the link that has been put into the webinar chat box to access these online. If we can support you through this presentation, please send us a message in the chat box and someone will assist you. For any additional settings, please go to your personal Zoom account settings or your in-webinar audio settings for more customization. So, to summarize our accessibility options, please select your language using the interpretation option, enable captions if required, and finally, please make sure to share your questions in the Q&A box. Our team members are on hand to help you with any technical difficulties you may be experiencing. So now, I would like to hand over to Rabia Khader, our National Director, as she takes us through some introductions and our land acknowledgement. Rabia?
Thank you very much, Michelle. Appreciate the perfect pronunciation of my last name. I'm really grateful for that in the spirit of equity and diversity and inclusion.
And Rabia, just to mention, your camera is off.
Oops, camera's off. Should not be.
There you go.
There, I'm sorry.
We see you in the wonderful banner.
It was on before. I don't know what I clicked. I'm sorry. My accessibility needs are the fact that I am blind and I'm using voiceover technology. So forgive me for having my camera on. I didn't see myself on there. So first and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional territories that we all are inhabiting and occupying through migration and colonization across Turtle Island. We are eternally grateful to the ancestors, the first inhabitants of these lands, who have protected and preserved Mother Earth from sea to sea to sea. We're very grateful to them for still allowing us to continue this occupation and settlement of these lands. We are very grateful for that, and we are committed to disability justice, as well as, of course, truth and reconciliation for our Indigenous brothers and sisters. I'm talking to you from Mississauga, Ontario, most recently the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit. And yes, I am the National Director of Disability Without Poverty, and I am a person with a disability who's also grown up with siblings with disabilities, including intellectual disability.
And I guess the final part of my introduction is I'm coming to you today from Kelowna in beautiful BC, where the sun is shining, and I'm coming from the ancestral and unceded lands of the Okanagan Syilx people. And I'm also a woman with disabilities. If you see me moving from side to side, as the light gets in my eyes, it's because I'm in my power wheelchair. So Rabia, back to you.
Thank you, Michelle. So today's webinar, we're talking to you again. We're attempting to talk to you quarterly. The last webinar was a year in review that also talked about where things are at with the Canada Disability Benefits C22. Well, here we are on April the 4th, 2023, and we are still asking the question, where's the bill? Well, where's the bill at now? The bill is in the Senate, which is our house of folks who have been appointed across this country to provide sober second thought. So C22 was entered into second reading and referred to HUMA, and with unanimous consent passed second reading in October when we were in Ottawa. In fact, the bill was referred to the committee called HUMA, which is the Human Resources and Social Services Committee. We don't always remember what the acronym is, so we just lovingly call it HUMA or HUMA. That committee held hearings from October 31st through to into almost December, or a part of December, and came back with its report, and the bill passed third reading. After third reading, the bill was referred to the Senate. It was presented by Senator Cotter as the person bringing it before Senate. In the House, of course, it was brought forth by Minister Carla Qualtrough. It's her bill, C22. So C22 now has achieved second reading and has been referred to the Social Affairs Committee, and hearings have begun. DWP will be presenting on April the 20th, in fact. We are pushing hard for royal assent. And as we move toward royal assent, we will let you know the next phase of our campaign that we're kicking off in these days and weeks ahead to bring forth you the Canada Disability Benefit. So we have a special guest with us today who's going to, in fact, give us his insight on where's the bill, what the process looks like, and what's happening at Senate. What's perhaps happening behind the scenes. Let's see how many parliamentary secrets he's ready to share. I hope he's online. Mike Morrice from the Green Party, our MP from Kitchener Centre, our greatest champion and ally in the House of Commons, who has stepped up for us when it came to our e-petition and has spoken repeatedly up to end disability poverty.
And just reminding you, Mike, that we've been given strict instructions that you have to be gone from here by 12:30 your time, otherwise we'll be in trouble with Roz.
So. And Mike, like any good politician, we'd like to remind you that you don't have the whole 21 minutes to speak.
Well, listen, it's an honor to be with you all this afternoon here in Ontario and this morning for those of you joining us from BC. I'll be really brief because I know what's special about this time is having questions answered from folks who are joining us across the country. So I want you all to know first and foremost that the Canada Disability Benefit is moving ahead because of the advocacy of the disability community. It's because of both organizations like Disability Without Poverty, like March of Dimes, like the MS Society, and so many people across the country who have made clear that we're not going to accept more delays to end legislated poverty. For my part, it has been a deep honor to get to be one of many parliamentarians who are advocating to move past the politics and to get this done. And I'm glad that one of the key amendments that I think is relevant to talk about today is the fact that we got a change to the bill that adds a requirement for people with disabilities to have meaningful engagement in the development of the regulations that will follow when this bill passes, where many of the most important decisions will be made. And it's through organizations like Disability Without Poverty that I'm hopeful that Canadians with disabilities will get to hear about what those opportunities will look like and actively be a part of it. Because my hope in this legislation being transformational really is in the advocacy I've seen from the disability community every step of the way, pushing elected people to just follow through on what they promised to do. So I'll pause there. Michelle, Rabia, really, really kind of you to include me in this conversation. And I'm happy to be a part of answering questions right through until 12:30 or just after.
So, Mike, I have some questions for you. So, this session is called Budget the Bill, and we've talked about how this will not actually be a bill that benefits people until there is a budget that goes along with it. And we have the budget that just came out, and it's good to see that there's money in that to keep on doing the work that has to be done and to work with disability organizations, as you said, to be ready to do that work in regulations. So I know that you submitted amendments to humor and were part of discussions, and there's two I think in there that really speak to the way money works, right, for the bill. One is a pretty straightforward that it's going to be index linked to inflation. The other one says that the governing council, which is basically the government as we make regulations, must take into consideration the official poverty line as defined in the Poverty Reduction Act. What do you think take into consideration actually means?
So thanks for calling that out, Michelle. We collectively got 9 amendments to the bill passed before third reading in the House of Commons. The majority of those came directly from the disability community. This amendment, I know the person who brought it forward, MP Zarillo, would have liked to see it go further. We wanted, because the disability community had been calling for an assurance that whatever this benefit is, that it's going to lift people above the poverty line. Unfortunately, the way the legislative process works is that MPs like myself and MP Zarillo can't propose amendments that are seen as beyond the scope of the bill. Another way of saying it is more ambitious or more significant than the governing party intended in bringing forward the legislation. And so the amendment that MP Zarillo was able to get passed is one that, as you said, Michelle, requires the poverty line to be considered. It's an open question what that will actually mean. It's a disappointment to me that in the legislation we don't have a greater assurance. I don't think that trust me from the governing party is sufficient. However, we weren't able to get more in the legislation. And so that means all the more important for our advocacy to continue to ensure that in the regulations, we're going to answer a question like, how much is the benefit going to be? And we're going to need to leverage the words like that. We need to take into consideration the official poverty line as we push to ensure that the principles that Disability Without Poverty has put forward are seen to play out in the regulations, and that this has to be above the poverty line. But we don't have an assurance in the legislation. And I think that's important to call out, Michelle, not to overset expectations, that we need to continue to advocate because of that legislation not being, in my view, sufficient.
Right. I presented to Humour as part of DWP, and I've already presented to SOCI, which is the acronym for the Social Something and Science Innovation, whatever that is, at the Senate. As Rabia said, these titles are so long. I'm sorry, we don't like to do it, but we tend to just refer to these things as with their acronyms, SOCI, which I'm told is pronounced Sochi, like the city in Russia where the Winter Olympics were, if everybody remembers that. So the questions from the senators were, I know there's some of the things that I've already seen popping up in the Q&As to do with clawbacks, but one of the things that I was asked directly that interestingly I wasn't asked at Humour was, how much do you think this Bennett should be? And it seems so obvious. Somebody last week, the words that they gave me, and I'm going to use, is that the request is outrageously reasonable that we actually raise disabled people to the poverty line. The poverty line, right? As regular viewers will know what's coming next. No lollipops and rainbows at the poverty line. It is the poverty line. So, for us to have a bill to reduce disability poverty, the only way it can do that to start is to get to the poverty line. It's the starting line, right? Because we know that it costs more to be disabled than not disabled. And, at DWP, we've long been talking about what we call the disability poverty line, which can be up to 40% more for most of us, and those with the severest disabilities can be 70% more than the regular poverty line. So I think it's good that senators are asking those questions directly to people who are witnesses, to get that on testimony that the amendment that has gone through, the consideration of it, well, we consider that the start line and certainly not the end. So, I think that's really important. But the next part of it is, we have to get those financial purse strings open and we have to get this budgeted, right? And, as you know, Mike, you stood up in the House after the budget and said, still no money for this. What do you see? I'm sure lots of people out there will probably think, what do we do? So this budget's gone by. What do we do next to try to budget the benefit?
We keep the pressure on because we know that when governments are serious about any priority, they allocate money to those priorities. And we can't allow for any kind of political spin. The fact is, the example I mentioned in the House is one of many that we can use. I use the example of childcare. When the governing party was serious about prioritizing childcare, and I'm glad that they did, they allocated money first. Then they had negotiations with provinces and territories. And now we're looking at legislation. And so when we get told by the governing party that we need to get this legislation done, it has to be done real quick. And also that the legislation has to be done before we fund the benefit. That has not always been the case and doesn't have to be the case. And that's why I was so disappointed that there wasn't money in this budget for the benefit. And directly answering your question, Michelle, that means we need to keep the pressure on. That we, again, Disability Without Poverty has been so powerful in your advocacy to push for fast tracking the bill, to improve the bill, and we need to also fund the benefit. And so for anyone joining us, you can be emailing your MP to let them know that you want them to advocate for funding the Canada Disability Benefit. And while it's not in this year's budget, it could be in the fall economic statement. There are many other opportunities for the federal government to step up in the meantime and ensure that we fund the benefit so that when the legislation and the agreements are done, that we get money out to people with urgency, because they need to understand that living in legislated poverty for anyone in this country is not acceptable, and it's not acceptable for people with disabilities.
Absolutely. So Rabia, I think this is the perfect moment. Would you like to talk about what
I
you
have
hear from
question.
Mike?
I have a little question for Mike first, and then I will talk about our next phase. It's like Mike's reading our mind and knowing our next steps. It's great. We're really glad that our thinking aligns with what needs to happen next. Mike, I understand that when the minister was presenting before the Senate, before the committee, about the bill, that there was a reference to getting money to the people by spring, summer of 2024, and not any sooner than that. Do you recall that? How do you feel about that?
Deeply disappointed that we could have had money in this year's budget. And we know when something is urgent, that governments know how to respond. We had CERB, for example, in the pandemic, and many in the disability community have been calling for a disability emergency response benefit, or DERB for short. These are actions they could take in the short term. I believe what the minister is getting at, if I think about the timeline she's putting forward, is that she's expecting that C22 will clear the Senate in the coming months. And in the legislation, one of the amendments we got passed is a requirement that the regulations take up to, but no more than 1 year. And so I think she's offering that timeline of the time it'll take to pass the bill and then complete regulations, assuming they complete negotiations with provinces and territories at the same time. And that's what I think comes up with this timeline of spring 2024. And I understand that's where she's coming from. My encouragement for you all would be to continue to advocate for funding to be prioritized, to demonstrate that they are serious at the scale required to eliminate legislative poverty for people with disabilities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, we kept up our Where's the Bill campaign, and now we're winding down Where's the Bill, because we kind of know where it is and where it needs to go. It needs to become law on the books latest by June. We need this done. We can't have another National Access Awareness Week go by with no law on the books. So 2 years since it was originally introduced in the House of Commons, over 3 years since the promise was made. It's time to realize the promise in the form of the law for the Canada Disability Benefit. But it is also time and this is what we're jumpstarting now this April, budget the benefit. That's our strategy now, our campaign now, budget the benefit. And budget the benefit has two specific levers that we're using. One is our postcard campaign. We recognize that not everybody is online. We recognize that not everybody has access to technology for a variety of reasons. And we also realize that a picture is worth 1,000 words. A hard copy through snail mail has more impact than an email that you can hit delete on. It takes longer to deal with a hard piece of paper than it does to hit the delete button when you get an email. So the postcard campaign we are introducing is in partnership with a number of our friends. We have postcards available, and Mike, we can make them available to you for your constituency as well. These postcards are addressed to our finance minister, Minister Chrystia Freeland, calling on her to budget the benefit in 2023. We know that she can do it in the fall economic statement. We know that she can do it with a special announcement. She has the power to budget the benefit, and we have the power to insist upon it through our postcard campaign. And Michelle, do you want to introduce our other tool?
Sure. Just to say with the postcard campaign that yes, we will be making them available widely in a print format, but there will also be digital ones as well that people will be able to use, and we will be targeting Minister Freeland and a number of the leaders of all parties and the Prime Minister to receive these postcards in Accessibility Week and at some other times. We have another campaign that is about to launch, and we'll get its official launch next week. And I'm very mindful, I'm keeping my eye on the clock as well, Mike. If you have to leave while we're talking, we are so grateful that you joined us. And as for ever, you are very much our friend in Parliament, and we wouldn't be here without you. So thank you so much, Mike. So the other thing that we're going to be launching next week is a campaign called Bleak Market. We reached out to people to ask them to tell us some of their most vulnerable stories. And people did. They told us stories of the things that they have had to sell to be able to survive as a disabled person living in abject poverty. So some of our friends that have provided us with excellent ad support, as you may have seen in the fall and so on, have continued. They came up with this idea, and we've run with the idea of something called the Bleak Market, BLEAK. So not the black market, the Bleak Market. And this tells the stories of these people, the ones that have been shared with us. And it also provides a link. So whereas it might look like an ad where people are selling things, you click on a link to say, stop this. And again, it takes you to those same messages to send to Minister Freeland to say, budget the benefit. So it's really time for, we've not held back at all, right, in telling us stories of disabled people, right? We've really just continued to make sure that everybody's stories is heard as much as we can. But we really feel that it's the time now for us to step up and tell these most vulnerable stories. And we know that some of those stories can feel painful to us in the disability community, but we can't do this alone in the disability community. We need non-disabled people alongside us. And one of the big things that we learned is that people who are not disabled and do not have a connection to disability in their families or so on, they don't understand disability poverty. And we've been told that, well, we just presume that disabled people are taken care of, because of course they are. Why would people in Canada not be taken care of? So it's time for us to really tell those stories, not so much to each other, because we know those stories, and we know the people, because they are, if it's not us ourselves, it's our friends and family. But it's really time for us to tell those stories to the rest of Canada. And so we hope that you'll support us in spreading the Bleak Market as well, which is a website, and that has been put together in quite I keep using the word dystopian, but that's the situation we're in. Mike used the phrase legislated poverty. That really is where we are. And as I say, if we go through this and we end up with a federal benefit that doesn't lift disabled people out of poverty, well, that's continuing this cycle of, what does that say? That we created a benefit to lift disabled people out of poverty, and we didn't actually do that. Because why? Because we didn't think it was worthwhile. So it's time for us to really, really step up and tell people exactly how this goes. So Rabia, it's 9:31. Mike, go away. You'll get us in trouble.
If I can just say, I think it's so important to call out that when we win the benefit, it will be because of all of this advocacy. It'll be because of every postcard that Minister Freeland receives, every share of the Bleak Market campaign, all of the CDB by 23 advocacy. And this is how our democracy functions. And we're going to get there, and we're going to get there because of all of your advocacy. And so I can't wait to share those postcards from my office. I think you're absolutely right that a physical piece of mail is all the more impactful. And I am really excited to see how much mail we're going to send to Minister Freeland through this campaign. So thanks to you again, to Michelle and Rabia and the entire team at Disability Without Poverty. Really appreciate the ASL and LSQ interpreters that we have with us today also, and to all of you for joining, because it is in this organizing that we're gonna be successful. And again, if you did want to send an email to your MP to budget the benefit while you wait to receive a postcard, first name dot last name at parl.gc.ca. Every call to budget the benefit is going to keep that pressure on, so that we lift up every person with a disability out of poverty. Like I said, it's an honor to be with you every step of the way. Thank you again for having me with you for this fireside chat this afternoon.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. You're indeed a friend of the disability community and an ally for disability justice. So the postcard campaign coming to you soon. If you're interested in acquiring postcards for your organizations only, we will be able to send it to you. For individuals, we will be able to provide you digital access, but also every individual can participate in the Bleak Market. Some of the Bleak Market social media ads are already running. The Bleak Market is up. There will be an official press release launch later next week, because we're sending a message to the senators and MPs, and they have to be in Ottawa for us to send a loud, clear message to them. So the Bleak Market also gives you the opportunity to send a message to the Prime Minister, to Minister Freeland and Minister Qualtrough, calling on them to budget the benefit. It carries the same message as our postcard, but in fact, it allows you to send off that message to more individuals who have the power to make this happen. Mike has reminded us that we have the power. 22% of our population lives with a disability. Well, the 22% of us have friends and family, have neighbors, have people who support us, have organizations that serve us. So we are the majority. We need to show our power in a democracy where we have the right to use all kinds of means to send our message to our politicians. So that message by mail, by phone call, by email, by knocking on their door, by standing up with signs, doing what we need to do to send a loud, clear message that the Canada Disability Benefit has to be budgeted in 2023. It has to be budgeted because just a law alone is not going to end disability poverty. Michelle, we have questions.
We have questions. So, Rabia, the first questions center around those typical questions that we would love to know the answer. How much and who gets it, and how's it going to affect me one way or another? Do you want to answer that?
We can talk about our principles here, which are on our website, and that's the message we are sending, that everybody who already qualifies for provincial disability benefits or any other disability related benefit offered by government qualify automatically for the Canada Disability Benefit.
Well, that's what we believe.
This is what we are insisting upon. Right now, we know that the benefit is going to be made available based on eligibility criteria. That eligibility criteria is not expanded upon. It will be expanded upon in regulations, and that's where we are going to push hard for what we want to see happen. So people who are on benefits should automatically qualify. People who are not but experience poverty should be able to apply directly to the benefit as well as seamlessly as possible. So everyone with a disability living in poverty should be able to access the benefit. That's what we're pushing for. The legislation, the bill itself is written to support working age Canadians who are the ones in the deepest of poverty. We know that there are seniors with disabilities in poverty. We know there are children living with disabilities in poverty. Let's get C22 done, and the journey will continue to make sure that everyone experiencing poverty has access to the income that they need.
So just to use some of the terms that are out there, Bill C22 is what is called a framework legislation. It's really small. It's not like this if you print it out. It's even with all the, in English and in French, I think it's only on 8 sides of paper total, because the plan has always been that after it gains what's called royal assent and it becomes a law, every bill goes through this process of the regulations, and the regulations work out for us, it will be the how much and the who, and the processes by how's it going to get paid and how often, and all of that long list of nitty gritty questions. There was a law came in 2019 called the Accessible Canada Act, and that sets out that nothing about us without us is basically the law of the land. There is a phrase in there that I don't remember exactly, but it says that if disabled people, if there is a law or a policy or a service that is being provided by the federal government, disabled people have to be directly at the table being part of it. So this bill is the first piece of major legislation to happen since then. So, of course, the voices of disabled people need to be represented in actually making that bill. We don't know how that's going to happen yet. Again, it's part of the thing that not just us at DWP, a whole coalition of disability organizations and individuals are trying to push for the ways that disabled voices will be heard directly in that process. And that process is where all of these things, who, how much, and so on. I'm going to move on to the next big question because it's one that I've spoken to quite a lot. So I'll go first, Rabia, and you can pick up things that I miss. Clawbacks. Oh, sorry, go, Mike. You're
Can
still here.
I stuck around because I saw the questions and I couldn't leave without. I'll leave you to talk about clawbacks. It's so important. I just wanted to share for those who are asking about the specific amendments. I'm sure the Disability Without Poverty team can send the amendments that we got passed. One of them, as you talk about clawbacks, that's so important for people to know, is that we did get one passed that at least requires the agreements with the provinces to be made public afterwards. So you're going to hear more from Michelle about promises we've heard from the government not to have any clawbacks. It's difficult. The federal government can't, in federal legislation, tell a province what to do, but we did at least get them to commit to making the agreements public. And through that transparency, give us the best chance possible that nothing shady is going to happen behind the scenes because those agreements will be made available. On the point about over the age of 65, folks should know that there was an attempt to remove the working age language from this bill. We weren't successful with it. And so there are limitations to what is in the disability benefit, and it does limit to age 65. And that last on accessibility of the benefit, we did get an important amendment through that came from the disability community that I proposed that has the language. It's something along the lines of that the benefit must be as accessible as possible. And I used the example at committee of a person when they filed their income tax would then be automatically considered for the disability benefit should they be eligible, in the same way that you're automatically given your climate action incentive. There are different ways this has been done for others. I'll have language in the bill that starts to give us the best chance possible of it being accessible as possible. So I do need to go for real now, but I just want to say again how important it is to have a venue like this, to have all these questions answered for people with disabilities to have answers, even if they're not the answers we want, to have groups like Disability Without Poverty offering these answers. So I'll go now to allow for that to continue to happen. Thank you again, and I'll join you again soon.
Thanks,
Thank you.
So I'm seeing many more questions than we'll get to in the time that's available here. So I'm going to ask our tech team that we make sure that we collect them all. I see some are appearing in the chat and some are in the Q&A. And Rabia and I will do our best to group them together in themes, answer them, and use them for a newsletter that goes out from DWP soon, so that it has in it. People are asking for the websites and email addresses because it's hard to write them down as we speak and that sort of thing. Absolutely. So we'll commit to looking at all of the questions and getting them out to you after this. So I want to talk about clawbacks. Mm-hmm. So as we know, clawbacks are insidious. Clawbacks take away things that are rightly ours. We know that, for example, you can't. So a clawback, for anybody that hasn't heard the terminology, that is where a government, provincial, federal, territorial, or a private insurance scheme says we're going to take this money back because you're getting money from somewhere else. So as we all know, that if you receive a provincial disability assistance payment and you get another benefit, say that you get CPPD, Canada Pension Plan Disability, that's clawed back. You can't have them both. So that keeps us back in poverty. It keeps us, to that lowest line. So this, as I said, and you may be wondering why I've already presented to Sochi, and Rabia is going to go again, because I have a few different hats that and I was asked to present on behalf of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities. So I went at the start, Rabia's going to go in April. And so, we worked together on these things. And the senators were very concerned about clawbacks, which they should be, because there should be no way that this new benefit comes in and is clawed back money-wise. And we know the minister, she said it publicly, that she has told provinces and territories and so on that this is a line in the sand that cannot be crossed. This benefit cannot be clawed back. But we're concerned about more than that. We're concerned about more than dollars alone. I use the example of a young woman who, I don't know if you're out there listening. Thank you for sharing your story on CBC, because that's where I read it. And this was a young woman who shared, the most personal details of her life, in that she's somebody that uses an incontinence product, as many of us do. She's in Alberta, and Alberta changed from a kind of low profile product that for her as a young woman who likes to, dress in jeans and all of those sorts of things, was good for her and her age and her lifestyle, to basically a bulky adult diaper. And as I'm preaching to the choir here, that the effects that this has on our quality of life, our self-esteem, those sorts of things. That is a clawback. Somebody made a decision that I'm going to, in a catalogue of disability supplies, that I'm going to go from this product to that product and save, 50 cents of whatever it is, or $1 or whatever it is. So we as a community need to, once this benefit is in place and, we get this no clawbacks, we need to be really clear about what we think a clawback is. So if a government takes away something that you already have, whether it's a service or a product, if it's a bus pass or whatever it may be, it doesn't just mean dollar for dollar money clawbacks. It means all of those goods and services that we receive as well. And you can bet your bottom dollar that that's something that at DWP we are going to continue to monitor and continue to forcefully advocate for. So I know I'm talking a long way into the future. I'm talking royal assent, regulations, money actually into people's pockets. But we are not going to give up on a dime of a clawback anywhere. Rabia.
And Michelle, that again gives us an opportunity to remind people that we are working provincially as well. We're working in British Columbia. We've done some work in Alberta, and we'll continue to do so. We're working, we have an active campaign in Ontario. We are engaged in Quebec. We have our leaders in Nunavut and in Newfoundland and in Saskatchewan. We have people reaching out and advocating across the country, engaging also with provincial governments, because if we don't talk to them and impress upon them what this means, then they will want to claw back. They want to save a buck, and this is an opportunity. We also don't want any administrative hiccups where, one government department federally issues money and another government department federally claws back. So the language we're hearing from government is harmonization. Well, we truly want it to be in harmony with everything else that exists for people with disabilities. And we want provinces and other areas of federal government not to neglect their responsibilities suddenly because there's a Canada Disability Benefit on the horizon. The Canada Disability Benefit is one aspect of lifting people with disabilities out of poverty. It is a very important aspect, but certainly no clawbacks anywhere that will undo the goal and the intent of the Canada Disability Benefit that we're all fighting for.
Thanks. Thank you, Rabia. there's a couple of quick questions. I'm looking at the time that just to just to answer. So the first one, what is the poverty line? So the poverty line is not straightforward, and I wish I could give you an easy answer. Canada has decided, rightly, I guess, given the size of our country and the ways we live, to come up with poverty lines based on each province and based on the sizes of each community. So there's something like 52 or 54 now official poverty lines in Canada, and they alter based on the community that you're in and the size of that community. I think the largest one is Vancouver, and it's about $2,200 a month. And the lower ones are for a rural community, I think in Quebec, and I think it's about $1,800 at the moment. So how is that calculated? So there's this complicated thing called the market basket measure, the MBM. And it basically has, it's quite a bizarre list. It says that, so in a year, everybody should buy, 6 pairs of socks and a pair of jeans and whatever it is. And it works out how much the minimum it would cost to get all of those things, and food and rent and that sort of thing, the minimum it would cost to get that in a community. And it calculates it for a family of 4, and there's ways of altering that calculation to make it for an individual person. So that's how it's done, and it's a number that the government set. You may remember, I'm sure we all remember, during the pandemic there was CERB, and what happened then was the government said everybody gets, except some of us, gets $2,000 to live on, because we see that as what's needed as the minimum of a living wage. So since then, CERB has often been thought of by people as the poverty line, and it's not far off, right? It's as I said, 2,200. It's about an average, but that's not the poverty line, just so you know. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at when we talk about people on disability payments, Atlantic provinces some of them don't have disability assistance payments. And so, people in New Brunswick, I'm pretty sure it's New Brunswick, are getting just over $700, right? Mm-hmm. People here in BC are, with the latest increase, just over $1,400. Rabia, ODSP, $1,228. So all of these numbers are way below the poverty line. And I could talk about it long and where that comes from in the history of how we see disabled people positioned in this country. But that's where it is. And so, as we say, to lift people to the poverty line, right, is an outrageously reasonable ask. Rabia, one of the questions that we've seen a few times is what happens if the government falls or if there's a snap election. Do you want to answer that one?
Well, this is why putting on the pressure now is critical. We can't slow down. And this is why we keep asking for the bill to be fast-tracked. It's harder for a government to undo a law once it is actually law. If it remains a bill, if the government dissolves, there goes the bill. We played this game in 2021 when we had the Canada Disability Benefit tabled as C35, and then there was an election, and hence another minority government. So the election resulted in C35 dissolved. We had to work really hard from fall 2021 to June, spring 2022 for another Canada Disability Benefit Bill, now labeled C22, to be tabled. We've come this far now. We cannot afford to wait, and that's why we know that the bill isn't perfect, but if we wait for perfect, we might find ourselves waiting a very long time for another bill to be reintroduced through the process. So this is exactly why we're insisting on the bill being fast-tracked. It is with Senate. Senate is doing its job. We should appreciate the fact that the House of Commons, our elected representatives, did their job in second reading, in third reading with the HUMA committee and all that kind of stuff, and introduced amendments to improve the bill. It is the new and improved bill before Senate. We need Senate to expedite this into law so we are not afraid of a minority government falling. If it is law, then we will continue demanding budget the benefit. We don't want to go back to where's the bill.
You know, Rabia, I think for you and I at the moment, not just you and I, all of us in the disability community, this is the breath holding moment, right? We are so close. We are so close to royal assent, you know, partway through the Senate's committee process, and then their amendments if they choose to do so, and then royal assent. And that's it. It's a law, right? We're not finished, right? You know, as you said, we would then, even if there was a change of government, we would have to work hard with getting through regulations, just as we would have to work hard, you know, right now, right? It doesn't matter who the government is, it's still going to be hard work. But the thought that we all work collectively so hard and get so close and find that it slips through our fingers at this point would just be, and to be, you know, we're not the only bill out there, right? There's other groups and other bills out there that want to get passed too. So you know, my hope is that the government realizes how that they need to work together to maintain their coalition of, you know, with the NDP. So I really hope that we get to royal assent, and then we can partially breathe until we move to the next stage. Rabia, we're very close to wrapping up time. I want to give you some final words before I go on to the final slides to wrap it up.
So this is very serious business, serious business. And we need to actively invest our time and energy in sending those messages to our elected officials. We need to really bring forward the power of people with disabilities, their families, friends, and allies. If you don't have a disability out there, you know someone who does, you care about someone who does. Or you're just a caring human being, because that's our nature as Canadians. You have to be involved. It's not good enough that, you know, my friend that I met one day in a parking lot was asking for someone to buy him food. You know, it's not good enough for people with disabilities to be asking people to help them out in the streets. This only happens in countries that have less fortune than we do, in impoverished countries where poverty looks very differently, not our Canada. So let's bring back our Canada and let's build forward a better future for everybody, including people with disabilities. So please actively participate in our postcard campaign. Search for the Bleak Market and share it and promote it and participate in the messaging. Let's tell Ottawa to budget the benefit now. We need to do this. And province by province, we need to organize. So as we're winding down, as I pass it over to Michelle to wrap up, can you please put in the chat which province you're from? Tell us which province is covered here. We have to work coast to coast to coast, folks. Michelle.
Thank you, Rabia. I just want to take a moment to thank the team of people it takes to put this together. First of all, you know, our love goes out to those of us at DWP that Rabia and I work with every single day and who have worked so hard to make this a reality. So Sabrina, Amy, all of the people that we work with in our provincial strategies, thank you so much. The people at Plan Institute, we've worked with you so many times now, and every time it feels like returning to to friends as I pull out, the tech things at the start, and I see you dealing with questions and queries for people's technical accessibility needs as it goes by. We simply couldn't put this together like this without you, and we really believe at DWP to having accessibility, out there in our webinars that we lead by example. We don't always get it right, but we try as hard as we can. And to the interpreters who've worked so hard today and the captioners, thank you so much. And to you, as I say, you heard me ask that everything in the chat, everything in the Q&A is collected, and we will do our best to do a follow-up newsletter that answers everything as best we can. If you're asking something that's individual to you, that's not something we can probably answer. So please get involved, contact your MP, look at our website, disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca, and you should find the tools to sign up for our newsletter, to find out ways to stay in touch. Together, we can work this through. Together, we can make this happen. And please help us to do everything we can to budget the benefit. Thank you very much. And wherever you are, I hope you have a great rest of day.
Thank you.